We'll just wait right till 12:30 to see if Dawn gets in. I'm sure he will be here shortly, so call the committee of the whole meeting for March 8th to order at 12:30 p.m. Ask for a motion from Councillor Cooey, the committee of the whole adopt the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting March 8th, 2021 as presented.
I'll give you that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Ask for a motion from Councillor Nychuk that the committee of the whole adopt the minutes from the February 22nd, 2021 committee of the whole as presented.
That motion for you, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Comments? All in favor? Carried. Go straight into the town plan review. Bree?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, members of council. As outlined in the agenda report, there have been 2 internal workshops regarding the town plan, one last September and one last month. The outcomes of these workshops indicate there have been substantial changes in the community since the town plan was last updated. Further, it was identified there are influential factors external to the town that must be considered when updating the growth management strategy. The workshop discussions also highlighted the rewrite project as an opportunity to significantly improve the overall structure of the document to make it more user-friendly. And finally, through administration's internal review, it was determined that the process undertaken to prepare the current town plan was policy-driven, which resulted in a planning document. Staff is recommending today to undertake a community-driven process to help garner understanding and awareness of the town plan and to create a document the whole community can relate to and use. A key difference in pursuing the community-driven process is that it is anticipated to take between 18 and 24 months to complete, whereas a policy-driven process could be executed in less time. To undertake the community-driven process, staff is recommending the town establish a steering committee composed of council members and members of the public for the duration of the project. The committee is envisioned to function the same as the Planning and Renewal Advisory Committee, or PRAC, which was the committee for the Land Use Bylaw Rewrite Project. And this committee will also be advisory in nature. Well, staff will lead the project, including providing project management and coordination of stakeholders, preparing mapping data, and execute public engagement. Staff are also recommending the town hire a consultant team to assist with the execution of the project. The consultant team will work with the staff to jointly prepare project deliverables, including an engagement plan. If there are no questions from the committee of the whole at this time, then I would like to go through the strategic questions in the report. So strategic question 1. Does the committee of the whole agree with administration's determination that a major review and update of the town plan should take place?
Yep.
Does the committee of the whole support finalizing the establishment of the steering committee and changing the committee's scope to be involved in the actual review and rewrite process rather than just a preliminary review?
Yep. I'm going by nods.
Does the committee of the whole support administration in hiring a consultant team to support administration with the review process?
Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. In regards to this question, I'm in support of it, but I want to understand at what point we're going to bring a consultant in to do this, because I think we've done a significant amount of legwork already ourselves, but the hiring of a consultant would mean we have a really clear and concise idea of where we want to go. Now we'll facilitate a consultant to help with the work and get us there. And the one part is that we don't have a steering committee yet that has provided any input into the process. So in my opinion, hiring a consultant right now would be a little bit jumping the gun. Before we had a steering committee in place in administration, and the steering committee could meet and discuss best moves going forward. So really, did I have a question in there, Bree?
Well, I can comment that I think our process is what you're suggesting. We do plan on establishing the steering committee as the next step and preparing, I guess, what we might call a request for proposal for a consultant team, or going forward and trying to hire a consultant team after that's established. So it likely won't be until late spring, maybe even early summer, that they're in place. And we'll also be trying to work on some background research during that time as well. So we're kind of moving them all ahead together, but we should have that clear direction that you spoke to prior to hiring the consultant team.
Yeah, I just wouldn't want a consultant to steer the direction. I'm very want much us to steer the direction, and being involved previously with PRAC and being with that group, and with the work that administration greatly contributed as well. We had a very clear idea of what we wanted to do, and we found the consultant that was best suited to help us get to where we wanted to go. I have an opinion on consultants, and some of them are really good and some of them could be better. And we just need somebody to be really good on this with us and in tune with where we want to go.
So would you be in support of I guess, our proposed process right now to hire that consultant team when we have that clear direction?
Oh yeah, that was the clarity I was looking for, was, in what measured step were we going to get to that consultant. I was pretty sure that's what you guys were doing, but I just wanted to be really sure. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yes, we're on the same page.
I'm good with it.
Okay.
Yeah, all good. Bree, next one.
Does the committee of the whole agree with the proposed roles of the consultant and staff? They're quite high level right now, but the idea is what Councillor Nychuk was speaking to. The project management and like the project itself will be led by staff with assistance from the consultant team.
Yep.
Yeah. So are there any comments or concerns with the proposed project timeline of 18 to 24 months?
Bruce?
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass, and thanks, Relyn. So the timeline, it seems a little long. I think you said, if I'm not mistaken, 12 to 24 months. And maybe could you just speak to the 24-month possibility and
yeah, so this will have more robust engagement to be a community-driven process. So where we see there being more time required, kind of versus the more conventional approach, is really developing how we're going to get that meaningful engagement and then executing it. We've also included a little bit of time in there, considering that we're under COVID protocols right now, and it's just undefined how long those might be in place or what impact they might have going forward. We won't be doing engagement immediately. I think what we'll do first is the background research. And I'd have to double check what our high level timeline was, but we don't plan on doing engagement until late spring of next year, I believe. So that's helping us to prepare, I guess, to make sure that that's meaningful. We're also trying to be conscious, even at this point, of engagement burnout. Knowing that the project might take more than 1 or 2 phases, it might have 3 phases, but we're still not sure yet. And yeah, we're just giving ourselves enough cushion so that we're not trying to set ourselves up to steamroll this project forward, when I think the best result would be from taking the proper time required. And usually it is still a lengthy project. Policy-driven approach would likely take at least a year still to 18 months. So I wouldn't say that it's substantially longer. It's just what we think would be reasonable at this time. Yeah, with what we know.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. It was a good response. Thank you.
Welcome.
Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you. I wonder, Brian, did you consider that since this is a statutory plan, that it will have to be vetted through the CMRB, and that the timeline on that could be 2 or 3 months at the end of the project? So it's going to take longer because of the additional red tape that the government has put into effect.
Yes, that's definitely going to add to the timeline. I suppose from the perspective I have right now, I was really focused on how long it would take the project team to get a draft in front of our council. But yeah, that's definitely something we need to consider. It might not be in effect at that point, and there will be an additional time required to go through the regional board.
Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Marsaris. Breland, just a kind of a comparative question, and maybe you don't know the answer to it. Khalid might know the answer. How long was it kind of from start to finish for the land use bylaw before that document came before council for the first time?
Thank you, Councillor Cooey.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Councillor Cooey. Yeah, I think when we had the land use bylaw, the RFP itself determined that the process must be completed within 12 months. So we've given them 12 months, and it was aggressive timeline. And so it was done within the 12 months range.
Okay, thanks, Lee. Thanks, Breland.
Good comments on the timeline, Breland. What we experienced with CMRB is that, number one, it's very hard to be creative and when you're doing Zoom calls constantly. And the other piece is with public engagement. It's just like, what did CMRB get? 190 some responses, through over almost 1.5 million people that are engaged that are part of the CMRB region. We got 190 some responses. So it's much better if we can try to do that next spring and hopefully be past COVID and be able to do some town halls and invite people to come out and listen to them directly, because this Zoom stuff is all great and everything for basic meetings, but when you're trying to be creative and actually get feedback and have a discussion, it's got its challenges. There's no question. So I like the way you got it set up. Further questions?
No, that's all the strategic questions. I guess we'd be down to our essential question and response options right now. Staff is recommending response option number 1 in the agenda report, and I'd appreciate it if Committee of the Whole could confirm their preferred response.
So is everybody reading that? I think we're all okay with number 1. Nods, 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 and more nods. Number 1.
Okay.
That all you needed?
I have everything I need. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bree. 4.2, 7th Avenue Southeast. Sarah, you can hear us? Are you up on the... She's going again. You're on mute.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. All yours.
All right. The owners of 625 3rd Street Southeast and 705 3rd Street Southeast would like to close a portion of the 7th Avenue Southeast unopened road allowance. They would then subdivide the land into 2 portions and consolidate those respective portions into their own lands to enlarge their lots. The land that we're speaking about today is not currently accessible to the public. It has actually been occupied by the owner of 625 3rd Street Southeast since 1981, when the town entered into a lease agreement with the owner at the time. However, that agreement that the town entered into has since deemed to be invalid because the land, which is an unopened road allowance, isn't actually owned by the town. It's owned by the province, which is the case for all road allowances in the town. This mistake was noticed by the town in 2016. Administration started the process of closing the roadway with the applicant again in 2016. So at that time, the applicant retained a surveyor, at the town retained a surveyor to survey the land. At that time, it was the town's practice to pay for surveys and then collect the money at the time of the application. In the future, going forward, the town would have the applicant just pay the surveyor directly and deal with that process directly. The first reading of the road closure bylaw was given on January 23rd of 2017. The public hearing was held on February 27th, 2017. At that public hearing, no comments or concerns were heard. However, the owner of 725 3rd Street Southeast did speak with administration on July 4th, 2017. And that conversation was in response to a letter that administration had sent out on June 20th, 2017. That owner explained that closing off that portion of 7th Avenue would actually cut off one of his properties from the road, and he would not be supportive of that proposal because it would result in him having a landlocked property. So as a result of those concerns, second and third readings of the bylaw for the laneway closure, the roadway closure never went forward. The owners of 625 3rd Street Southeast and 705 5th Street Southeast requested that the file be reopened this past spring, May of 2020. Staff had an initial discussion with Alberta Transportation regarding the survey because it had actually been registered at land titles after it was completed in January 2017. Alberta Transportation did explain to staff that the town will need to deregister it if the road closure does not move ahead. However, they do understand that the town is actively working with the landowners at this time. So right now, it's not of a concern because they understand that this is an active file. So staff did hold a meeting with the 3 adjacent landowners on August 17th, 2020. At the meeting, it was decided that the applicants were going to, as the next step, were going to contact a surveyor of their choice to discuss a plan that would be suitable for all of the parties, and then they would share that plan with the town. The meeting in August also included a discussion regarding the water main that runs through the unopened portion of the road allowance in 7th Avenue Southeast. That's a town water main. A utility right-of-way agreement is going to be required in the event that the road closure moves ahead. After a plan from the surveyor was obtained by the landowners, administration had a follow-up meeting, and this time it was just with the landowners of 625 3rd Street and 705 5th Street, and that took place in September. The plan proposed that they came up with proposes to register an access right-of-way to be located on the town's property, which is actually Little Bow Park. The town administration at that meeting, and then through a follow-up letter, explained that it is not able to support an access right-of-way which goes through a town park or green space. The access right-of-way may actually give the impression of implicit permission to the landowner to use that portion of land in the park as a vehicular access, either now or in the future. And this could impede the town's ability to make future changes or improvements to the park and is ultimately not in the town's best interest. So at that meeting, it was decided that the applicants were going to consider some alternative options, which would not require the access right-of-way to go over the town's property. So options for that could include an easement for 725 3rd Street Southeast from 8th Avenue, or an access right-of-way across the land that the owners of 625 3rd Street and 705 5th Street would like to acquire. At that meeting, concerns about the trees in that land area were also concerned. The owner of 625 3rd Street did state that there is a poplar tree with an overhanging branch, and he would like the town to attend to that. The issue is that the access has been cut off, so our Parks Department does not have the ability to maintain trees inside of the fenced area. At the meeting, park staff did confirm that if there is work that needs to be done with the trees, as it is public property still, it is required that a certified arborist is hired to conduct the work. And the costs associated with that would be covered or would need to be covered by the resident, as that area is fenced off for his private use. So at the meeting, the applicants and staff did agree to a deadline of April 1st, 2021 to provide the town with an alternative proposal that would be suitable for all parties. If the parties are unable to provide a solution that is acceptable to all of the parties by April 1st, 2021, that it is expected that the improvements on the province's property be removed and the fences be realigned so that the property lines, the current property lines, by October 1st, 2021. One of the applicants did email the CAO on January 4th of this year, and it included a new proposed access right-of-way plan. Staff did write a response letter. That response letter requested a written narrative so that this plan could be reviewed properly internally so we understand what the plan is proposing exactly, as well as requesting a letter of support written and signed by the owner of 725 3rd Street, confirming that the proposal will satisfy his concerns, because the town does want to ensure that his concerns, as well as the concerns of all three parties involved, are satisfied before we move ahead with processing this application again. In the letter, staff did remind the applicant that the appraised value of the land has already been provided, and that the town will require a full assessment of the health of the trees by a qualified tree assessor, and that this information should be provided to the town parks and facilities supervisor. Finally, in the letter, administration reiterated the deadline of April 1st to provide an alternative solution, and the deadline of October 1st to remove all of the improvements and realign the fences to the current property lines if that solution is not met, is not provided. So the purpose of this briefing note was to provide council with an update on the status of this file. And again, we have provided that response letter to the property owners, and we are expecting to receive that written narrative from them, as well as the letter of written support from the owner of 725 3rd Street to ensure that the proposal that they are considering would satisfy his needs. That concludes my presentation on this subject. Are there any questions?
So what are we doing?
Well, right now we've issued a letter. We've issued a letter to the owners, and we are still waiting on their formal written narrative explaining what exactly they are proposing. And we would like to see a written and signed letter from the owner of 725 to make sure that this proposal satisfies his concerns, because we don't want a repeat of what happened in 2017, where that proposal didn't satisfy his concerns, because all of the adjacent landowners need to state whether or not they have concerns, and if anyone does, Alberta Transportation will not sign off on this.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Carol.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you very much, Sarah. I have a few questions. So regarding the renewed interest in the road closure, how much would a deregistration of a survey cost?
That was a question that Land Titles said would require some further consultation, or some further information from the municipality on whether it was a full or partial. So they said that I should get back to them when I have more information about how the applicants in the town want to move ahead with that process.
So not even a rough idea? Like, I'm just kind of curious.
I mean, I wouldn't think it would cost more than $100 because it is just an administrative task.
Okay.
Typically, their fees are approximately $30 to $50 for typical administrative tasks.
Okay, thank you for that. And on page 55, bullet number 4, and in the literature, one of the applicants was talking about the fact that the tobogganing hill might have negative impacts. I just wanted your opinion about that. And it's on like 2 explanation of intent proposal landowners.
Okay. Was that, I'm just going through that now. Was that one of the emails?
Well, it's in the report, the summary of comments, and with the redacted, you know, taking out people's names, but it just says there is a hill within the 7th Ave Southeast unopened road allowance by the river that is currently used for tobogganing. Stated, so-and-so stated that he does not want any negative impacts on the tobogganing hill. So I wanted, like, planning's perspective is, would there be a negative impact? Because I think it would be a shame to lose a tobogganing hill.
I agree with you. So my understanding of the proposal is that the owners only want to own the piece of land that is currently fenced off. So that piece of land does not include the tobogganing hill. The tobogganing hill, as it stands right now, is extremely accessible to the public. And I agree with this individual that it is a very important feature of our park, and we would not want to lose it. So my understanding is that the landowners only want to own the land that is currently fenced off. We will confirm this when we get their formal statement of intent. But if that is the case, then there would be no change to how it is laid out right now. And the tobogganing hill is extremely accessible to the public. The public just needs to walk through the laneway to access it, not the roadway.
Perfect, thanks. And then just a little bit of a comment about that water main. I didn't realize it's so old, like 1900 to 1909 was the, so any comment about that, Sarah, about this?
Well, engineering and operations haven't given a specific comment about when it would need to be replaced, but they have noted that it is, as you noted as well, a very old line. So as part of the agreement, as we would enter into any agreement, even if it was a brand new water main, we would have to have conditions in that agreement that would make it very clear that if the town ever needed to go in there for any reason, whether it's maintenance or whether it's full replacement, we could do that. And we wouldn't be responsible. And like it would have to lay out what the town would and would not be responsible for. And typically in our agreements, we wouldn't be responsible for replacing things that are placed on a easement right of way. That agreement still needs to be written if the landowners want to move ahead. So I can't speak to what would be in it, but those are typically what we would see in agreements of that nature, because it does happen from time to time that they need to be replaced or they need to be maintained, either routine maintenance or emergency maintenance.
Exactly. Thank you for that. And then who incurs the road closure fees, the town or the landowners? Like that part I just wasn't clear about.
The landowners are going to incur the cost. There's an application cost. They will be responsible for paying the cost of their surveyors. They have already incurred costs from their new surveyor. They will incur the full cost of the survey plan, and they will be responsible for all fees.
Thank you. And then on page 59, the last bullet of section 5 with the poplar tree maintenance. I'm just curious because the last bullet says town staff confirmed that it is not of particular benefit to the town to have the unopened road allowance closed, as opposed to maintaining the land that is owned by the province. Therefore, the town will not be pursuing negotiations with, like, the redacted name. So can you explain that, please?
Yes, the other landowners wanted the town to reach out to the person whose name was redacted, but our point was that it is important for the three landowners either to work together or for the main two landowners to find a solution that at least is acceptable to the third landowner so that he will ultimately sign off on this, because that is what Alberta Transportation is looking for. So the point was that this is not particularly a town project. This is not a town-driven process. This is an application that two private landowners would like to apply for. One of their main issues that they need to overcome is finding a solution that works for the third landowner. That third landowner is not particularly benefiting from this process in any way. So we were just conveying to the two landowners that it is their responsibility to work with that third party to make sure that it works for him before the town starts our review, because it's really not beneficial for anyone involved to have a repeat of what happened in 2017.
Most definitely. Thank you for that. And then, on page 71, this is my final question, so thank you everyone for bearing with me. But what is the answer to the landowner's query in paragraph 4 regarding the sewer hookup? And that is on a letter.
Okay.
It's attachment to.
Oh, that helps me. Great.
Email from the owner of 725 3rd Street. And it's dated November 19th. I'm just trying to find. Yeah, because he's on about the access to the sewers for.
Right. Not finding it, but I do know what you were referring to. I don't have an answer on that piece specifically. That was an email that was really between one of the two landowners. They haven't specifically asked the town that question, so it's not something that the town has been looking into. Perhaps it's something that the landowners would like to include as like a question to the town in their application overall. But if that is the case, that's something that we would expect to receive as part of perhaps the formal written narrative that we requested in our formal letter to the applicants.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Councillor Cooey.
Thank you, and thanks, Sarah. A little bit further to the trees, and I apologize if I've missed some of this, but those trees, we've talked about them being provincial property. Are we kind of stewards of that land for the province? Like, why are we taking responsibility for the trees or telling them, the landowners, what they should do with them?
Good question. So part of the land that we are discussing today is only part of the 7th Avenue unopened road allowance. There is another part of 7th Avenue that continues west and hits the river. So that area, if you went to the site, you would just see it as part of Little Bow Park. So the town does maintain that park. It's a bit of an odd situation because part of the park, the 7th Avenue, isn't actually the town's property. It's the province's property, but at the same time, it is acting as a public park. So that is why the town is maintaining it. Typically, in road allowance situations, it would be a road. So the municipality would have care and control over this land regardless. However, it's just a bit of an unusual situation because instead of it being a road that the town has care and control over and is plowing the road and maintaining it as we would, it's a park. And that's why we maintain the trees that are on that park.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So then just for clarification, if you're looking at the map on page 32, 32 of the bigger document, I don't know what it is in your report.
Okay.
Tell me exactly where the landlocked property is, please.
Okay. I will.
It's attachment 1 roadway closure proposal. I think it's the first map.
Could I speak to attachment number 5, parcels map with addresses? Because
Sure.
that has the numbers.
What page is it on, Sarah? Please.
Unfortunately, my version does not have numbers. It is number 26 of my report or attachment 5. I'm not sure why what I have downloaded doesn't have page numbers.
Sarah, are you meaning the actual plan?
It's called attachment 5, and it's just a map with the addresses. So it's called parcels map with addresses. I'm not sure if I can share my screen.
Sarah, I just shared the screen here for the map that Council Koo wanted.
Would I be able? Okay, we can use that one. The landlocked property is the one that is west of 705 3rd Street Southeast. That owner owns 3 pieces of land. There is one that is directly west of 705 3rd Street. There is one directly south of that, which used to be a laneway and has been closed. And then there was another one south of that, which is where his house is. Those 3 pieces of land are not consolidated.
Okay, we're talking about Terry Coleman's piece of land, Cooey.
Right, okay. So, and he doesn't want to provide access to that from Water Tower Hill because I have 8th, I guess.
Exactly, that could be a potential solution, just having an access right of way over his land from 8th Avenue. You're right. However, that individual doesn't stand to benefit from this application. So he's really put it on the other landowners who are standing to benefit from the application to come up with a solution that might work for him.
But Sarah, does Terry not have access off 8th Avenue? There's a gate in the road and everything there, right?
He does have access from the one that is abutting 8th Avenue.
Yeah.
However, the one that's to the north,
yeah,
doesn't technically have access because all of those properties are separate. He absolutely could, if he wanted to, have an access right of way across all of the properties.
All 3 of his own properties, correct?
All 3 of his own properties. He could also consolidate the properties if he wanted to, but that choice is really up to him.
Sure, but where I'm scratching my head is he doesn't technically have any, physically, he doesn't have any access off of 7th.
And he does understand that.
He doesn't have any access now, any more than he would after this, right?
Yes, and he does understand this, and he has confirmed that he understands that.
Okay.
Yes.
So the only access, at the end of the day, Kathy, the only access Terry would ever have to that piece west of Doug is through his own property. Ever.
Yeah, I don't ever see us continuing on with 7th. So I guess I have a couple just further concerns and then I'll be done. The timeline is coming up and I appreciate that we've put the onus on the owners. I want to ensure that we've communicated, and I know there's a letter. Sometimes, you know, I guess I want there to be some clear communication with that deadline. And can you assure me that if they come to us on March 28th and say, here's a solution, that we can still make it happen? Because I know our processes are going to take some time. So is it even feasible at this stage of the juncture, even if they came to us tomorrow with a solution, that we can meet these deadlines?
We just wanted them to have a solution by April 1st. It doesn't need to be done. They've reached out, one of the owners actually reached out to Chris recently and says that he would like a site visit, and he will be suggesting some times that the CAO and the planning department could meet him on his site.
Okay, I guess just one more question for consideration. If we are never I guess you never say never, thinking we would continue this road on, then I do think we have a stake in this decision and a role to play in this decision, rather than leaving the onus entirely on the owners.
Chris?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add a point here. There's two different forms of access. One, there's legal access. When your property abuts a road right of way or a laneway that gives you legal access. And then there's a difference between physical access. What is actually drivable, what's actually usable. The Land Title Office only really looks at legal access from that perspective, and how it's protected through right of way or through easement or through a dedicated road. In this case, the owner of 725 is in direct control of what we do, and I don't think there is any way we can force him not, if he doesn't agree with an option, force him to close that road off. And that's going to be the difficult part here, is that he is in full control of this, and Alberta Transport, with their process, requires him to sign off on any solution before they close that road. So that's going to be the tricky part here.
Hey, Sarah, just to go back, one final question I have is access to the toboggan hill. You're
Yes.
saying that our residents would still have access through here to get to the toboggan hill?
Through the laneway. I personally went to the toboggan hill. It's one of my favorites not too long ago. And all you need to do is park on 3rd Street and walk through the laneway. And then you can use the toboggan hill that takes you all the way down through Little Bow Park. You don't need to walk on the land that's fenced off, that's currently fenced off. You can just walk through the laneway and access the toboggan hill.
So I don't know exactly where the fence is, but where do you get in? So my question is,
Like, where do you walk? How do you get to the toboggan hill? I just went through the laneway. I'll try to.
where? Like, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen. I'll try to
Because when
find
we
it.
split this, like when I look at your map with the
Right.
power lines and stuff where everybody wants it split, it looks to me like there's going to be a fence line around here somewhere that's going to split Doug and Blair's property. And so that's why I'm questioning, Chris, maybe you can, like, where does the public access
The
Logan?
laneway's further to the north. If
It
you
is.
went further to the north, there's a laneway that ends up into a cul-de-sac at the bottom
Yeah.
of the hill. And if you take that laneway, you can gain access to the toboggan hill from there.
Yeah, exactly. And so everyone who likes to toboggan there just walks down the laneway, and there's like a power pole by the laneway, and usually people just line up to use the toboggan hill by the power pole.
Okay.
I can share I got Google Maps up if you want to Need a visual of that, Mayor.
No, I think we're probably okay. I was just curious as to, just as long as we are still going to have access, regardless of what happens, people still have access to that hill. Any other questions? Chris, you're continuing on. You're going to have a site visit with these guys and we'll keep moving, grinding this thing forward. Okay. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Community budget survey reports with Kaylee. Hello again.
I'm unmuted now. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me today. I will be hopefully walking you through just a bit of a presentation in relation to all of the statistics and qualitative information that were provided to you in the briefing note. I'm just going to share my screen with you. If there's any issues, if you guys cannot see the presentation, please let me know. Oh, we're good then, perfect. Okay, so just to start off with today, I want to go over a little bit of what we did and why we did it, as well as a few key pieces of information just to keep in mind as we go through the data. Ultimately, the budget survey was created and put out to the community to help us as an organization understand some baseline concepts and ideas, their perspectives around a variety of services that we provide to them that would ultimately help us inform our budget decisions as well as some other priorities within the organization. So not being an expert in engineering and planning and a variety of different departments, I did reach out to a number of individuals throughout the organization to make sure that we were going to ask questions that were relevant to each department and be able to actually utilize the data that we get from there. And we based all of the questions around the strategic plan. From there, we developed questions that were both quantitative in nature, so those numbers-based ones, as well as qualitative questions to allow citizens the opportunity to provide extra insight for us moving forward. We did offer the survey both online and in paper, but I think due to COVID and having people more homebound this year, we didn't receive a lot of paper surveys, and most were completed online, and ultimately we had 286 responses. Of the responses that we did receive, 66% were female and just under 50% were between the ages of 51 and 70. So we are missing a bit of that male perspective, as well as the younger youth and the middle-aged adults as well. 88% own their home, and almost, again, half of the respondents have lived here for 15 years or more. So when we look at this as a whole, again, we may be missing some of those demographics and information coming from individuals who may rent here, who may be living here for free with family or friends, or some of the newcomers to our community. But I also think that this speaks volumes to the fact that we do have a community rooted in people, just given the fact of how many people have lived here for quite so long. We also were asked to consider asking some questions around business ownership. And so we did have a number of respondents who do own a business, and just a very few who own a business here but don't live here. So everyone that did respond to the survey has some vested interest within our community, and almost everybody was living here as well. So we did hit our targets on that. As we move forward through the presentation, you're going to see a bunch of slides with a lot of numbers on them. I'm hoping that they provide a better visual as an understanding around how we came up with the different themes. So I'm going to speak to the themes that we found within with respect to the different topics within the strategic plan. So the first topic is safety and security. Ultimately, what we heard from residents with this particular questions around municipal enforcement is that they are looking for a balanced approach in our service delivery model. So we asked questions that were related to whether or not individuals wanted to have a call placed into our municipal enforcement, or if they were just out and about in town and noticed something, if they could take action. So we did receive a few qualitative comments related to this, not a ton, but there were definitely some just wanting municipal enforcement to be able to act when they see something, and just to make sure that we also have the funding in place to allow them to adequately meet the needs of our community. I did want to draw attention to the satisfaction ratings for this particular question set. We were a little bit lower than most of the other question areas that we asked, but we had a really large no opinion section again. Those who were dissatisfied were also a little bit higher than the norm throughout the rest of the survey. But given the fact that we don't necessarily know why those elements are the way that they are, this would lead us to the understanding that we do have a little bit more work to understand where residents really do sit within that, especially within these respondents. We also asked questions related to our emergency management, and overall we had a lot of support for the different measures that we use. So just over 80% find High River Alert useful and very useful, and 85% are finding that they're confident or somewhat confident in the measures that we have in place in the event of another future emergency. So, again, we got good accolades for that. Next, we move on to fire services and personal safety. The fire department did request that we ask, just based on the different services that they provide, to measure satisfaction. And we see that every service that they provide received either a satisfied or very satisfied by more than 50% of respondents. And again, in the comments, we did hear a lot of thanks given to the fire department for their services. So it's always great to hear that feedback. As far as personal safety is concerned, there were a very wide-ranging number of comments that were left. So ultimately, our main theme with that was general safety. So there would be one person who mentioned lighting throughout town on walkways, another person who would mention something like speed limits or bump outs. So they ranged quite a lot, and so general safety overall was our biggest theme. The next largest was related to crime and crime prevention. And this truly was more related to RCMP and law enforcement as opposed to our municipal enforcement. So it's a good learning opportunity for us as an organization to see that there's some educational opportunities there for us as well, just to let the community know what some of those differences are and where best to direct the comment. The next topic of the strategic plan that we covered was responsible development. And the first theme that we wanted to cover was planning for the future. We asked questions around a new asset management program, and there was a lot of favor towards this particular program. And as well, you can see over 50% of the respondents said that they would contribute to this on a yearly basis financially. So there were a number of comments, though, that were related to the expectation that this would have been in the budget already. However, again, there's a lot of favor towards including it now. I did want to draw attention to the public transportation question. We asked if these respondents would feel that they would ever use or be in favor of a fee-for-use public transportation system. We got an overwhelming no to this question, but again, just keeping in mind the demographic, individuals who own their own home very likely own their own mode of transportation as well. So we don't know if opening this up to a broader demographic within the community would change this particular response, and it may not, but it is just something to keep in mind. As far as direction for taxes, I think we are hitting the mark. The majority or the highest frequency of responses were around maintaining our service levels and keeping taxes at 2%. Just over a quarter said that they support improving services and increasing taxes by 4%. Anything over that, we didn't receive a lot of support, and lowering services and taxes was not of interest either. So again, I think we're heading on a good course for these particular respondents. Moving on to healthy urban environment within the strategic plan, we were specific in asking a number of questions around the downtown core and the work completed there on a frequent basis to make it attractive not only to our residents but to visitors as well. Every different project that we do there that we were asked to get feedback on received either a very satisfied or satisfied response by 50% or more. The exceptions to these are parking and bike racks. I know that you are all familiar with the parking comments, but where I wanted to draw a little bit of attention is around the bike racks. So again, the largest portion of that question was around no opinion. And so my thoughts are on that is that if people are choosing to park downtown, they likely aren't riding their bike downtown. And so they probably do not have an opinion on the matter, but again, it is an area where we can do a little bit more investigation in the future with citizen engagement. There were some mixed feelings though on snow removal that is not completed downtown. Non-residential streets were getting a strong satisfaction rating, but residential streets were split 50-50, which again, I don't think is anything shocking necessarily. We do hear that feedback, but again, it's a good opportunity for us to be able to educate the community as to what goes into that, and maybe again, get further insight so we can better provide services for them. We did ask a question around snow removal on the happy trails on weekends that would require a fee increase. We do see that nearly half of the respondents had said no to that, but again, a large number were unsure. So a bit more information would be required before we could make a final decision on that. There is a lot of support for active transportation in our community. The first is our walkability measures. 53.1% are satisfied with our walkability, and that's a huge difference from those who are dissatisfied. And I think it's not a shock to any of us, but almost 85% of the respondents are satisfied with the happy trails as well. We did ask a question about potentially moving into a bikeability direction. Again, you can see that these are a bit more of a 50-50 split between those who would be in favor and those who would not. But again, based on that particular demographic, bikeability may not be of a top of mind for that particular respondent base. There were also some mixed feelings on curbside recycling. So at first glance, we see that almost half of the respondents would pay nothing per month, but the remainder of the respondents, just over 50%, would pay a fee for service to include that alongside with their garbage removal. So again, I think some further insight would be required, but just some food for thought for administration. As far as organizational excellence goes, we started off with asking some questions around the live streaming that was introduced due to the pandemic. There was a lot of favor for having the live stream, but most importantly, the recordings posted online. A lot of individuals had provided feedback that it gave them an opportunity to become more educated and engage with more of our community's topics at hand, because they have the ability to access those meetings at a time that works for them. And as far as availability of counsel goes, we did see that there were 0 respondents who said that they were very dissatisfied. So that's always a good thing. And again, a heavy response of no opinion. So in the qualitative responses, we heard that very few people had a reason to come to counsel. And so again, I think that also is a good sign, but when they do reach out, they were either satisfied or very satisfied. We then asked some questions around operation of the organization, and in the first 3 questions that we asked around transparency or communication and the direction we're heading, we did receive the majority of responses being either satisfied or very satisfied, but we can do a little bit of work there around doing what is right and responding to the need. I unfortunately do not have greater insight into what that necessarily looks like, but again, that's an opportunity for us to further get some information as we move forward with the surveys in the future. Ultimately, the respondents also said that they did find they get good value for their tax dollars, and they do value the services that we provide. So again, a strong majority said that they were satisfied or very satisfied with the services, including customer service. They've had some really strong and good or excellent experiences with our staff. And then again, just over half of the respondents said that they were satisfied or very satisfied with the value for their tax dollars. Moving on to vibrant community, we did ask the top 3 reasons residents lived in High River. You're going to see 9 here, but I really wanted to show you what this looked like to help illustrate what we heard from the community. When I went through and coded all of the responses, sense of community was the #1 or the most frequent response for the #1 reason, #2 reason, and #3 reason people choose to live in High River. So then essentially each of these boxes would just be filled with sense of community, which again, I don't think is anything shocking to any one of us. I did want to continue coding and illustrate what some of those differences were. Natural environment is another one that came up in every single category as well. So those 2 things combined make up a large proportion of why people live here. The three differences that we found were, the first one was size and our small town feel. The next was services and amenities. And then the third was our location and proximity, not only to some larger centers, but also more natural environments in those mountains. The issues that should receive the greatest attention, the number one issue that was reported was to increase the support for businesses and the business base within our community. It was the largest majority of responses by far. The next two were improvements to the downtown core and taxes and spending. This seems a little counterintuitive based on the quantitative results we had from those earlier questions. So again, a little bit more insight into this would be valuable for us in terms of moving forward with that data. We then asked about the community activities and programs that are currently offered. There were three that did receive lower satisfaction ratings, the first being indoor rec. But again, based on the circumstances of 2020 and having most of our services closed to the public, it would be valuable to continue to ask this question of the community as things continue to open up, as those were some limitations imposed on us that were outside of our control. The other two, the first was family and community support services. Again, there were not a large respondent rate of dissatisfaction or very dissatisfied, but again, a large portion of no opinion. So based on the fact that our demographics were individuals who likely own their own home and have social connections here, having lived here for more than 15 years, the services of FCSS just may not regularly be utilized by this particular demographic. The same can be said for the Greater Foothills Family Center. So again, being that the respondents were between 51 and 70, we likely aren't seeing those individuals tapping into the resources provided for our children and youth within the community. And then lastly, we just wanted to comment on the sense of belonging and engagement that we have. I will address the fact that this question did not have a straightforward neutral response. However, we're seeing a large majority who are saying that their sense of belonging or level of engagement is above fair, which again, I think speaks volumes to that sense of community that we do have here in High River. So overall, just to explain some of the utility moving forward, for the town of High River and administration, we do want this data to help inform our current and future decisions. Make sure that we're utilizing this as that community perspective to help guide our direction moving forward, as well as to help educate the community around some of the decisions that are made, feasibility around some decisions that are made, and how to best again inform them and include them in some of these decision-making processes. And then for the community to let them know again that we are wanting to hear their ideas and have a space for them to share their perspectives and help engage them in this topic, right? Get them pumped about it and hopefully, again, educated a little bit more. We did attach the communications plan. So as we move forward with this project, with it being an annual survey, we are looking at a few different ways to increase our demographics, make sure that we're trying to target some of those demographics we missed in the first survey, as well as finding some new and maybe unique ways to put some reports out to the community and to ask some questions of the community to continue that engagement and hopefully some excitement around this project. With that, I will ask if there are any questions or comments.
Thanks, Kaylee. Carol.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you very much, Kaylee. This must have taken you quite some time, and I know you love statistics, so you're the best person to do this type of stuff. I would like to pick your brain, though, around how do you think we can get more, I would say, fruitful data? Because I'd hate to have your hard work go to naught. So I guess my first question, just as a reminder, is how many people did fill out the survey?
286.
So just picking your brain, what are some ideas that you're already kind of brewing up about how you can engage more of a broader?
So I think some of the things we've discussed so far is perhaps changing the name or the title of what's going out to hopefully encourage others. So there are questions that are specifically related to those who do pay taxes, and we have to acknowledge that as well. But there are some pieces of this that, yes, those who rent in the community have just as much of a vested interest. So looking at how we kind of put this out to the community in terms of, somehow like the title, that might shift a little bit for this year. And then I know I've also started to see a bit of engagement around, so through social media, but where we may be able to ask more frequent questions on a somewhat more informal basis. So to continue to gather some of that insight behind what goes out, so that when we do a formal survey, we have a bit of background information about perhaps what best direction to move the questions. But I will admit, I will be working closely with the communications department on that to make sure that we're able to meet the needs of the research side, but also ways to engage the public in a meaningful way.
So does FCSS have a survey themselves after you see clients about, like a little 2-line questionnaire or something?
So we don't have a survey that we do with residents through FCSS on a appointment type basis, but every year when we do our income tax, so we do about 1,000 returns a year, a survey goes out with the return that we then ask them to fill out and send back to the community or back to our office. This, however, was completely different. So I didn't have necessarily my FCSS hat on for this project, just more of an overall town of High River hat. So.
And just thinking about the ones that go out with the income tax, Kaylee, what is the return of them on an average?
On an average, it's quite high. Last year was an outlier, and it didn't. It wasn't quite as much of a success. We had a lot of things up in the air with having to change the entire way we ran that program last year as well. So I know that we didn't have as large or as strong of a response rate last year, but I would have to look into the details from the years prior. But I can get you that data. It was really strong. So I know that we can provide that feedback.
Oh, that's good to know. No, I think you've got a very challenging job, because to reach the entire demographic, because I'm just thinking about the people who don't have time to be on social media or don't have time to fill out surveys. It's just, how do we capture their voice? Because they do have a voice and insight into, especially when this is a document that's providing direction to the town for future planning. So I think you will have a very interesting experience trying to capture everyone, because of course it's that whole component that makes it the vibrancy component. So, but thank you very much for everything you do, Kaylee.
Thanks, Carol.
Bruce.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. So, and thanks, Kaylee, for a great report. I think I mainly just wanted to say on behalf of the male slackers in this community that they really need to step up. Like I think it was 69% of the respondents were females, and that's wonderful. It shows a great level of engagement and involvement. But that's a really, really low percentage of males. I'm afraid I don't subscribe to the theory that people might be too busy to fill out a survey that takes them 10 minutes to do. It's a matter of priorities and setting priorities and being and understanding that responding to a survey like this, if could affect their quality of life and how they look at High River and how they fit into High River, and I think if anything, we have to be a little more vocal about that. That this is the future of this town, and this is how you fit into this town, and everybody has to really. And we have to help with that, as council, on our social media and whatever, and I have to admit, I didn't help spread the word, but I think it's just really, really important that we make it clear how important surveys like this are. Like, you know, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm not a huge fan of surveys. I'm just not. But I think when they're presented and framed in such a way, and this is not a criticism at all of how we did this, but I think you know, when they're framed in such a way that people really understand how important this is to where they live and our relationship to each other, you know, you know, that we have to be more caring. We have to, you know, even though a question may not pertain specifically to us, we still have an opinion on it. And so I don't know. I totally agree with what Carol was saying. You know, tough assignment. It really is, and I think you did a great job. And the rest of the town people, admin people that worked on it. You know, it's a tough assignment, and but I think it's up to all of us to help get that word out. So so thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. No other questions? Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care. Shelley and Halid.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am here with my colleague Halid to provide some information to administration with respect to the letter of request that we received from Laurent Ingalls on behalf of West Winds Communities and their partner in this project, Habitat for Humanity. It was really important for us that Council was aware of the town of High River's desire and need actually to have a comprehensive housing strategy for our community. And while the offer of current research on affordable housing would be valuable and would demonstrate, would contribute to a large component of the strategy for High River, it would not be sufficient for us to allow us to complete a real broad housing strategy. Ideally, this work would be planned and led internally in partnership with a consultant. We would like to note, however, that the results of a plan or strategy, should it be developed internally, would be made available to West Winds Communities upon completion. The attachments that I shared or that were shared in the briefing note, they were provided just simply as examples. The one from CMHC, just to provide a bit of a bigger picture to the potential steps involved in a larger, more comprehensive study. The one from Lethbridge, from the city of Lethbridge, was included just to demonstrate how the engagement with the community is possible and how they utilized a housing task force. And lastly was the image of the continuum. We often talk about the housing continuum, and I liked this particular image as it demonstrated just how fluent and how, as residents, we often move in and out of that continuum dependent on our circumstances. Halid, is there any additional information you'd like to share?
I think, thank you, Shell. I think we've covered the basic information, which is important, but I think it's really about the main vision for affordable housing within our community, and what does it mean, and how the importance of having strategy, you know, because we've always dealt with it in a piecemeal. So we've never given it a comprehensive strategy. Well, what does it mean, and how can it fit within even new communities and whatnot? And so, you know, looking at opportunities that we need to have in our community, it just wasn't given a good attention. So I think it's an opportunity, but at the end, it depends on council wishes and council interests as well. So.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you, Shelley. I think my first question or comment is more, I would direct it to Chris, is at our last council meeting, I asked for feedback about financial options, which is noted in the minutes in our regular council. So I was a little bit surprised that we're discussing an affordable housing strategy. So I'd just like to, I guess I'm just a little bit surprised about this directional turn. And then I have some other comments.
Certainly, Councillor McMillan, I can probably comment on that. Finding the $14,000 that West Winds had requested is not a big issue for us. We can find that money if council so chose to delegate that funding to her, and that's not a big struggle. But what we wanted to do was also inform council, and Shelley and Khalid were tasked with meeting with Lauren to talk about what their process was going to be with Habitat for Humanity, what the funding would be used for, and see if there was a collaborative way to move forward together. Knowing that we have huge gaps, not just in the affordable housing information that we have, but on homelessness, seniors housing, market value housing, attainable housing, and the whole continuum of housing that Shelley has alluded to. And that from our perspective, as we move forward with the town plan, this is data that is really needed to help us develop policy for the future. And we can certainly, and Khalid identified this, we can certainly approach it from a piecemeal basis, but if there's a way that we could work collaboratively together at the same speed, that there's those opportunities. And so this is kind of the backdrop from both Shelley and from Khalid, about based upon their conversations as well as what the needs are within the community. And I think, one thing that I don't think was clear in the briefing note, Shelley, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was your department having working on a proposal with the Rural Development Network, if I'm correct, for doing a affordable housing strategy. And that was kind of at the same time as Lauren's proposal. So that's the money aspect of things is easy to answer. And I could have probably answered that on the last meeting, but I think this was some good background information before we made that kind of decision. It's easy to find $14,000. We can find that for West Winds if council so chooses. But it's not necessarily going to be useful information in our overall housing continuum kind of conversation that we're trying to embrace right now. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Chris. I guess where I'm coming from, though, is when I read the desired outcome. The desired outcome is for the town of High River to actively pursue the development of a long-term housing strategy and is recommending the work be led jointly between town administration and a qualified consultant firm. And I don't think that the town of High River currently, and I could be wrong, but does our staff have the capacity and expertise to do this? I mean, West Winds Communities, they're a leading industry in this and their expertise, and they know about CMHC things like when I was reading the package, because I was just thinking about the economics of this is why, especially they're a direct stakeholder. I mean, that's why there's a board rep even on. Why would we not make it an automatic situation where West Winds is the lead or collaborative, not the lead, but working with the town on this, because not only to save some money, but to work collaboratively, to have the RFP process and, have oversight. I think I'm just very confused. Why would we seek out an external consultant when we've got, sorry, there's a fly flying around my house.
Well, and certainly, we're not housing experts internally at all by any stretch of the imagination. We certainly have knowledge and dabblings in all aspects of it. But the affordable housing component is only one very narrow sector of housing on the housing continuum. And that was very, very, very specific. And I think, in order for us to, and this is going to a longer term vision with our town planning process, is in order for us to develop really good housing policy, we need to take a look at all housing on the continuum, from market all the way down to social housing. And that has to be something that needs to be done as part of our town planning process, a housing strategy, which there is funding available out there through the Alberta Real Estate Foundation that will fund housing needs assessments in full that support the development and real estate community. So there is those funding options that are available out there too. There's also funding through CMHC, as well as other avenues that the federal government has announced some funding as well that will fund some affordable housing strategies or social housing strategies. So there is some funding available, and that just takes time. And I think we need to be thinking, we need to get the town plan kicked off first, which we started this meeting off with, and then have this conversation on housing, because housing's a big issue, right? And it's not just affordable, but it's attainable. It's what are the needs for the development community? The development community will not be interested in affordable housing strategies. Our development community here is primarily interested in that market and that entry level kind of housing program. But affordable housing, there'll be very, very few of our existing developers that will show any interest in that. So how do we create policy that forces our developers to consider affordable housing integrated into their communities? Those are types of the links that we have to deal with as well, is how do we link this? Because we don't want to end up ostracizing social housing or affordable housing by creating neighborhoods of only affordable housing. It needs to be integrated into our existing neighborhoods, Montrose, Northwest, Spitzy Crossing, and it needs to be a more holistic kind of approach. So that's kind of the conversation that we had. But if council wishes to provide the funding to West Winds to do the affordable housing component, that's not an issue. We can certainly find the funding.
Well, Chris, if I may, I guess where I'm really getting confused is, to me, the affordable housing is the umbrella. It's including the homelessness. It's including the near market. That was the impression I was under. And I guess my question would be, wouldn't it be a better use of administrative time if you took that completed study to help with then the town's affordable housing plan?
No, affordable housing is just a component within a housing needs assessment, Councillor McMillan. That housing needs assessment looks at all housing needs within the community, and affordable housing is a segment of it. And so it's not an affordable housing strategy as an umbrella, it's a housing needs assessment that then creates policy underneath that defines policies for affordable housing and how we're going to tackle the need and the action plan associated with that. And same with homelessness, seniors housing, transition housing, and social housing as well from that perspective. So understanding your need first is your first step before you can really develop a strategy or an action plan. If the numbers come back and say we don't need affordable housing, that we have enough within the community, then what do we spend our money on? And until we know that housing demand, what the housing demand is within the entire community, we need to answer that question.
Well, I guess I'm just really confused because sorry, Kathy, I know you're waiting, but I guess my perspective is, I don't see how we could ever get a consultant for $14,000 to do this when we've got call West Winds a consultant. They've got the expertise, they've got the know-how. They would work collaboratively with the town. They're one of our stakeholders. They're not an external group, Edmonton or San Diego, to come in and help us talk about affordable housing.
No, Councillor McMillan, they can still do the work, but they'll be only on affordable housing. We would still have another 8 chapters to add to that to have good housing policy.
But what I'm saying is, I don't see how just one study would be for the whole housing policy that you're talking about. Of course, the town would be involved with that, but I would think that there'd be more of a collaboration when you've got this leading resource of housing knowledge, as well as the community of High River and the needs. Why not work collaboratively? Like when you're thinking about, take the town plan about steering committees and things like that. You could have a steering committee for this. You could have representatives and having West Winds and the town working directly together. I guess I'm really not at all understanding this.
Yeah, and we could, Councillor McMillan, I'm not saying that we can't work collaboratively, but it needs to be an approach that is integrated with all the other housing needs, right? To do it as an island and have conflicting data that we may not have, that's done by a different consultant firm or consultant team or a different entity, and more on a regional basis too, right? We have to remember West Winds is looking at a more regional basis look at this housing needs. This is a housing needs that's looking at our boundaries. Here's the study area, very clear, very decisive, and not being influenced by things that are outside our boundaries from that perspective that we cannot control. on the politics and decision-making capabilities outside our boundaries. So that was kind of the intent. We can certainly fund this study and take that data. It may or may not meet our needs. We don't know that. But we would work with them to try and define the scope. And hopefully we can come with common alignment and be able to tease out the data that we actually need. And then we can also see if they're interested in taking a look at the overall housing needs assessment as well in its entirety. But there are funding streams out there that are significant that will fund even the affordable housing strategy. Not the real estate foundation will fund it, but there are some other housing streams through not-for-profits and community foundations that will fund a good component of that as well. And
I'm going to move this along and get to Kathy.
Sorry, Craig.
No, you're just fine.
I hope you understand, Councillor McMillan.
Kathy.
Thanks very much. I guess I'm looking at it a little bit different because I absolutely think if this is something we've decided is a priority and we feel we need this overarching plan, that I think probably does go a bit beyond what Westwind would be looking for. That if this is what we want to do, then absolutely, I think we need to take the lead. But I also don't know why we can't work collaboratively with Westwinds and Habitat for Community and also answer their questions within this, rather than having their group potentially doing something and us doing something, to bring them into the fold and putting some of the questions and looking for the information they need under the overarching plan. I guess maybe, Chris, you just answered that, is they're looking at it regionally and we're just looking at it from the High River perspective. So maybe I've answered my question why that might not work.
Well, and I think we didn't have time to fully explore all the options where we could collaborate, right? We just reached out to say, this is what we're thinking of doing. Can we line up? And there's still, we had 2 weeks to put this, less than 2 weeks to put this report together, and to have that conversation. So I think there's still all sorts of options and hybrids out there that we can create. That is a complication, though, Councillor Cooey. The regional perspective is information that would be useful, but will it help us guide our policy? Should we be working with that, or is that something that Foothills County should be kind of coming into the fray as well from that perspective and collaborating on that piece? I think, we can collaborate with anybody under the sun. Oh, well, I shouldn't say that. Let's be careful about that. We can collaborate with anybody, but it's also, I want to speak to your strategic priority kind of question too, because, council did not identify affordable housing as a strategic priority when we went through our selection process, and it's low down on the list currently. But we do need that information for the town plan, which is a priority. That is on the next list. That will be moving on to council's priority list here shortly. But it is a priority, and that is very fundamental information. It is the foundation of your town plan. It defines your land use for the future. And getting that information is really, really key data that will be very important to help us make decisions and inform decisions in the future. And can we work with Westwinds? Absolutely, we can. Us giving the full $14,000 to them just means that it reduces potentially our ability to leverage that funding or grant funding to do the full housing needs assessment, and go from there. So, housing's not just one segment, right? We have to look at it entirely, all aspects of it. And we have to make sure that we're dealing with the market housing, the affordable housing, the social housing, and of course the seniors and the assisted care. So there's a big continuum, and that graphic is bang on that Shelley shared from Lethbridge. That is probably the simplest way I've seen it defined in my career, for sure.
This is nowhere on our priorities chart. The one that we have in our agenda today, the housing needs assessment, is nowhere on that chart. The only reason why we're talking about this is because Westwinds showed up with an ask that they wanted to do something. This was never on our current radar right now at all. So I'm having a bit of an issue that, all of a sudden we're going to want to take this all on. this is an ask from West Winds. And the question to council is are you willing to give them 14K for what they're doing, yes or no? Very simple. If we want to do something in the future, well, then let's talk about that. But let's take this one out of play, because we're currently with our strategic priorities chart, affordable housing is nowhere on that list. So I'm concerned with why we're even all of a sudden talking about this, that this is all of a sudden a real important thing that we have to do, because obviously council did not identify it as an emerging important need thing to do right now. I don't think council gets a lot of feedback on we need more affordable housing. I sure don't, to give you my direct. So I'm just concerned with how much time we're spending on talking about this, that it's all of a sudden this big priority. I think it only is because West Wind showed up asking to do something. So the question is still to council, 14K, yes or no to West Winds? Carol?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I just think as far as this particular needs assessment goes, that I still don't understand how it couldn't be used in the future for when the town deems affordable housing on their strat plan, because it's for 10 years. So it's not like it's just a 1-year thing. So it's doing it over a 10-year, projecting for 10 year. In response to your comment, though, I do receive comments on a regular basis about the lack of affordable housing.
Okay. The information that West Winds would come back with absolutely can be taken under consideration. It's information that can, I think it would be irresponsible for us to just discount that because somebody else did it. That would be a little bit reckless for us to discount what they're doing. So like I said, the question still comes back that we still haven't answered the question. It needs to come back to a council meeting as to whether you want to give them 14K, yes or no. And then we can have the conversation, do we all of a sudden want to do this great big affordable housing study and hire a consultant and everything else and elevate that onto our strategic priorities chart? We have the strategic priorities chart that guides what we do. And Chris is always very careful when we come up with our new asks as to where are we at with this. Currently, as I said before, this conversation is nowhere on that chart. So the next quarterly strategic meeting that we have, maybe we guide Chris to elevate it. But currently, no. Your hands up again, Carol.
Yes, please. So I guess going back to my request prior is, can I request that when Chris said that possibly the money could be found, what I was looking for when I made this request is that it would come back to the future council meeting with specifics. Where would this money come from if we are funding this? So is that a possibility, or is there just no appetite at all?
That is a council decision, not an administrative decision as to where the 14K is a yes or a no. It'll be Chris's, and Chris has said we can find the 14K. The ask is 100% under council, whether we say yes or no.
Mayor, if I may make a comment?
Yep.
And Carol, I think if I understand your question on that one, the loss of 14K from any of our departments will not hamper our operations. So if council chose to provide 14K for West Winds, one, it'll either come from a multitude of departments or from general operating surplus that we, as you are aware, that we have a pretty good operating surplus. So it's not going to affect any aspect of our operations. If that's what the concern about where it's coming from is, it won't affect our operations.
Thank you, because that was my concern. So I guess then, because we're in committee of the whole, can I just ask that this item comes up for I guess it would be the next, like not the next meeting in an hour, but I guess the following meeting in 2 weeks, or?
It can absolutely come in the next hour if you wish.
I'd like to deal with it.
Done.
If that's possible. Thank you.
It's in. We will add it in. No further questions. We'll move on from that one. Thanks, Shelley. Thanks, Alid. General questions? Anything else for Chris? Jamie?
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I got a question for Chris that's brought to my attention over the weekend. We did a number of repairs to the spray park last year. We hired a contractor to do the work. My understanding, or I was told, is that there's a number of deficiencies or some deficiencies on that project, and that the contractor hasn't been paid out due to holdbacks on the deficiencies. A couple of questions. One is it going to be ready? Is this going to affect us when this opens in the spring? And what sort of actions are we doing? Is it sounded like it's just being left there, sitting there on a back burner somewhere? And this does affect people.
Thank you, Councillor Kinger. I'll defer to Riley. He'll have some additional information.
Correct. So we actually didn't finish the work last year. There was some concerns with, because we did pivot and reopen. And so we did defer some of the work specifically around the drain. And so we are looking at getting that done and completed before we start up this year. It wasn't a workmanship or deficiency issue. It was just purely we deferred the work the way scheduling was working.
Interesting. Thanks, Riley. I'll talk to this fellow because he's being told that it's deficiencies and that's why they're not paying him for the work that he did. So
there was there was deficiency work at the pool. I'm wondering if those are
Oh, spray park. I clarified with the pool, and that was sort of going to be my next question, is pool pretty soon?
They should actually be putting water in as we speak.
Yes, thank you.
So on the spray park, we did do a bunch of expansion joint work last year. So I'm not sure if there was deficiencies associated with that work or not, but I know it was, the drain was deferred. So I'd have to look into the expansion joints.
Okay, if you could let me, you're talking about at the spray park, if you could let me know, that would be great. Thanks, Riley, before I say anything. Thank you.
There are quite large slabs of concrete, and where they join, there were some unevenness, and we were having that addressed last year.
This is when we get most nervous about the pool, is when they start putting water in it.
Raylene and I have talked quite frequently and have had our fingers crossed. So yes, but water's going in.
I've got gum.
Raylene said if it comes to it, she's just putting gum on it this time.
Carol?
Thank you. I'm happy about the pool as well, because I've had lots of questions about that. I had someone reach out to me the other day. A person who plays pickleball was just wondering about the outdoor land issue, like when it was determined that it was on floodway where the original, is there any other locations being looked at?
I can provide a quick update on that. We're still waiting on the province to come back with their updated flood mapping that integrates all the protection works that we've built to protect the community to make that final decision. They have looked at other locations and have ruled them out and have come back to the one that they prefer. And I just got an email about an hour ago asking to, they just had their annual general meeting. They want to have a conversation about that location, indoor pickleball, as well as the tennis courts as for the upcoming spring season. So I'll be able to provide them an update from that perspective. They want to be behind that ball diamond, and that's under our current floodway mapping. That's still a significant issue.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, do we have a timeline about when council is going to be back in chambers?
No timeline yet. And that's a conversation that I think all 7 of you need to have about when to have coming back, when you feel comfortable coming back into council chambers. I know there's lots of communities across Western Canada that are meeting face-to-face with dividers. Some are still doing remote work, but there is a hodgepodge out there that's very, very difficult to gauge when's the right time to come back into the office space.
I just wondered, because when I picked up my mail 2 weeks ago and I went in just to look, I thought it looked pretty like safe and organized. So
we feel all the protective measures are there, but it's the comfort level of the individuals that we're taking into consideration.
okay, thank you.
No other questions? Meeting adjourned 2:14. See you in a bit.